Hello and welcome to Tech Gets Real. My name's David Meyer. This week I'm not going to talk as much as I usually do about AI. Instead, I'd like to zoom out to look at a subject that is just as urgent for those of us who don't live in the United States. And that is, how could we get off American technology if we need to? What would it take to do that? And why would we want to do that? Actually, that last question's pretty easy to answer. Trump. Whatever your opinion of the man, there is no denying that Trump's America is no longer the reliable partner that it once was for many places in the world, like Europe, where I am. It's also clear that Trump will use whatever tools of power that he can to get his way. On the international stage, that has mostly played out so far as a trade thing, but there's no guarantee that it'll stop there. It's very easy to imagine other scenarios where Trump might try to bully the rest of the world into towing his line because of the threat of withdrawing American technology. For example, Trump has threatened to annex Greenland, which is Danish territory, rightly or wrongly. He has threatened to make Canada the 51st state, and at the time of recording, a lot of people are seriously considering that Trump might be about to invade Venezuela for whatever reason. In any of these scenarios, it's pretty easy to imagine how there would be a huge amount of pushback from the rest of the world, such as, let's say, European countries. Only for Trump to turn around and say, well, you want to play it like that? You're not going to back us? We're going to take away the things that you need for everyday life. These are crazy ideas, but they're not unthinkable, not anymore. And that means we need to prepare for them. But before I continue, please consider subscribing. This is still a very new channel. I'm seeing positive signs about its growth. I think this is something I could be doing for a long time, hopefully. But every subscription, every like, every comment helps at the moment. So thank you for your help. Moving on. In a few weeks, there's going to be a big summit here in Berlin, organized by Germany and France, to discuss the subject of European tech sovereignty, the idea that Europe must build out more of its own infrastructure and services so it doesn't have to rely on American companies. Of course, this isn't the first time that this discussion has been had. Rewind 12 years, and we are at the time of Edward Snowden's revelations. Snowden was a contractor for the US National Security Agency who walked away with thousands of secret documents and told the world that the US had been using big tech as a way of spying on people. Essentially, that US intelligence agencies can easily go to these big tech companies and say, hand over everything you know about this person. The companies can't really push back against it, and the people who are affected certainly couldn't. When those revelations came out, the reaction in Europe was one of horror. It was terrible that this was happening. It was betrayal by the United States. As Snowden explained it, the US intelligence agencies had kind of been working alongside the European intelligence agencies on this. The idea is that nobody's really allowed to spy on their own citizens, so everyone spies on each other's citizens and shares the information quietly. But anyway, there was a big discussion in Europe about how we were all terribly overdependent on the US big tech and how we must get off it. For the most part, it wasn't a discussion that lasted very long. It only took months for a lot of Europe's political leaders to turn around and say, trust has been regained, which was understandable politically. The US was Europe's biggest ally, and because nobody had really had the getting off US tech discussion before, it was impossible. There was nothing in place to make that doable. The most tangible reaction in Europe to the Snowden revelations was the passage a few years later of the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, which is Europe's big online privacy law. The idea was, well, if we're stuck with US tech, then we can at least stick a bunch of rules on it and force American tech companies to respect Europeans' fundamental rights around things like privacy, data protection. But even then, the law keeps clashing with political reality. The GDPR says that Europeans' personal data is not supposed to be sent off to countries that don't have strong privacy laws, but the US certainly doesn't have strong privacy laws at all. Yet the European Commission, which is the political head of the EU, keeps saying, well, it's okay, we can keep sending everyone's data off to the US. And that's a political choice. After the Snowden revelations, there were some more concrete attempts to wean Europe off American technology. Germany and France had this idea of creating something called the Europe-only Internet, and also to build out a so-called sovereign cloud that would make it possible to go to companies and say, hey, you've got to store Europeans' data here in Europe. But there were concerns over protectionism, and US big tech muscled its way in. When the sovereign clouds appeared, the biggest providers were companies like Microsoft. And in 2018, the US passed something called the Cloud Act, which essentially said that their intelligence agencies can scoop up the data that's held by American companies in their data centers all around the world. So even in the case of European sovereign clouds run by American tech companies, those companies would be obliged by their laws back home to give intelligence agencies access to the stuff they're storing. So Europe's attempts at tech sovereignty have kind of fizzled out, but it's all back on the agenda big time since Trump got back into power in the US. That's partly because of Trump's aggressive stance on the international stage and his general unpredictability, but it's also because US big tech is now sucking up to the American administration way more than it ever did in the past. Since Trump came back into power, Meta, for example, has reversed its stance on content moderation. It's allowing things like racist and homophobic language, which are illegal in Europe, but are perfectly fine by the US administration at the moment. What's more, Meta has made it very clear that if Europe tries to enforce its rules against the company, it'll go running to Trump for backup. And Trump has given every indication that he will do that. He will push back against Europe enforcing its own laws. So for Europe, tech sovereignty is no longer just a matter of having the tech to substitute in for American tech if needed. It's about being able to apply its own laws. It's about actual sovereignty, not being a vassal state. YouGov did a survey in July which found that half of the people it surveyed in France and Germany and Spain believe that big tech is now more powerful than the EU. And Emmanuel Macron, the French president, said on October the 3rd, "We have been incredibly naive in entrusting our democratic space to social networks that are controlled either by large American entrepreneurs or large Chinese companies, whose interests are not at all the survival or proper functioning of our democracies." Now, in some ways, nothing's changed. Europe still doesn't have a serious competitor to companies like Apple or Microsoft. It has one company that makes big AI models, France's Mistral, but we have no capacity to make the kind of advanced chips that you need for training big AI models or for running them. So we are still reliant on other parts of the world, the US in particular. But that said, this is an opportune moment to wean ourselves off many of the big services that we've taken for granted for the last couple of decades. And that's because this is a time of big change anyway. Elon Musk kindly demonstrated this, thanks Elon, by taking over Twitter and instituting really horrible policies there, driving away millions of users who went off to other services like Blue Sky and Mastodon and Threads and discovered that life can continue after Twitter. Meanwhile, 5-10 years ago, it would have been absurd to say that you could create a serious rival to something like Facebook because of how entrenched it was. Everyone's contacts, their friends were already there, so how do you pull them away? Well, nowadays, Facebook hardly ever shows you anything from people that you follow anyway. It's all algorithmically driven, so it kind of doesn't matter anymore. Your friends may as well not be there anyway. And then there's Google, the quintessential big tech must-have that everyone's used to using. Well, the whole search market is in flux at the moment, thanks to AI. You've got rivals like Perplexity trying to come in and dethrone Google, and Google is so desperate to stay relevant that it's kind of replacing its own familiar experience, sticking AI results at the top of every results page, pushing down the list of links that everyone's used to seeing, and essentially becoming a new product. So now's the perfect time to replace Google with viable alternatives. Europe accounts for more than 20% of the revenues of these US big tech firms, so they don't want to walk away from the European market. Of course, they've never had to seriously contemplate such an eventuality because Europe has never had the political will to make that threat, let alone make good on it. But times have changed. This is the era of playing hardball. And Europe's leaders should realize, as they re-examine the idea of tech sovereignty, that A, it's a lot more viable these days than it ever was before, and B, they potentially have leverage against the big tech firms that they could use to influence American policy. This is not a time to play nice. It's a time to seriously organize and build a future where we are independent of American technology if we need to be. I wish I didn't have to make this plea. I'm not anti-American, but the America we have now is not the America that we once knew. And that America may not be coming back. We simply cannot have a future where we rely on America to function. Anyway, I hope you got something out of this. If you did, please hit like and subscribe, and please share it with somebody else who you think would also get something out of it. And I will see you next week.